Hey guys, so welcome to this session today of Ask a Pro. My name is Richard Curtis and I work for Adobe, and today we have Tigz Rice.
Hi, I'm Tigz. I'm a professional fashion and boudoir photographer.
Thanks Tigz. It's a pleasure to have you here to talk to our audience today about your retouching workflow. And I know there's a lot of people out there really want to make their images look amazing, and I know today there's going to be really a great insight into our viewers to see how you retouch your images and how you make them look amazing. So tell us, Tigz, what are you going to do today? How are you going to retouch your image that you have on the screen?
So today we're going to start in Lightroom. We're going to go through white balance, exposure, making sure your uprights are correct, and then taking the image into Photoshop and working on the finer details. So any form of blemishes, skin tone, highlights, shadows, all of that kind of stuff.
Cool, okay. So when you start retouching, do you have something in mind, like a creative vision that you're going to do, or do you just kind of experiment a little bit until you get what you want to achieve?
In terms of photography?
Yeah, in terms of photography and also the final output.
So it depends. If it's a client-led shoot, then sometimes I don't necessarily have that freedom. So there'll be something set in mind. I'll obviously sit down with the client and we'll discuss beforehand what they're looking for out of their photos, which is normally based on something that's already in my portfolio. Okay. If I'm doing something that's a little bit more, my own, with my own inspiration, I'll sit down. I've got a great creative team, stylist, makeup artist, fashion, all that kind of thing. And we'll sit down together and maybe we'll start with a word, do a storyboard, come up with some ideas, source costumes and that. So then we've got more creative freedom in the studio as well. So we'll play around with different lighting, play around with different techniques, shooting through things, shooting from different angles, that kind of stuff.
Cool, okay, cool, okay. So how are you going to start today? How are you going to start on this
Cool,
picture?
so we've got this image here of Betsy and we're starting in Lightroom. So this is where I'll do all of my basic exposure, white balance, correcting uprights, all that kind of stuff. So looking at the histogram up here, we can see the image is pretty well exposed. It's all the way across the histogram, but could do with perhaps just a little bit of lightening. So just going to knock that exposure up just a couple of notches there. In terms of white balance, maybe she's looking just a tad pink, so just knock that down a little bit as well, and take out some of the yellow from the tungsten lighting that was in the room.
So I see you using the keyboard there for doing those edits. Is that more precision for you? Is that why you're doing that?
I find that it gives me increments. So for example, with my temperature, you can see that's knocking it down by 50, or if I hold the shift key down, that gives me 200. Okay. So it's just a very quick way of getting those increments rather than using the slider. And you don't have to actually go into the numbers. If you just hover over them, it will do it as well. So it's a really quick way, especially if you're using the tablet as well. You can just hover over them without having to click on things.
It's a great little tip.
Yeah. Perhaps just bring up the shadows just a tad as well. So I'm going to put my profile corrections on here as well, and that's going to get rid of any lens issues that it may have. So I was shooting with a 5D Mark II with a 70-200 lens, and if I just toggle this on and off, you can see specifically around this carpet area it lightens, and it also drags that out to a better perspective.
So so you're removing any vignetting that's caused by the lens, or any cushioning that's caused by the lens as well?
And I mean, that's not to say that I don't want the vignetting there, but it gives me more control that I can add it myself later, which we'll be discussing later on. Okay. I'm also going to just tick this remove chromatic aberration, and that's going to get rid of any sort of colour cast that I might have just on the sides of things. And then this upright level button, and that's going to take everything that's meant to be a parallel or a sort of like a level horizontal line, and it's going to correct that for me. Cool. Now, this is an automatic and it's done a pretty good job here, but you can see there's just a slight bow in this wood, so I can come into manual as well.
So it's interesting you're using that on a scene like this, where typically they're used for buildings and trees, but actually you can use it in this sort of scenario as well, where you have a horizontal, which is just in this case a bed, which is another feature, another tip of how you can use this type of technology to get your pictures right in the first place.
So once that's all finished, the next thing I'm going to do is import this image via dynamic link into Photoshop. So if I right click on this or control click on a Mac, I can come in. I've got the options to either edit in Photoshop CC, or I can open as a smart object. And the benefits of using it as a smart object, firstly, computer handles it much better with the file size, but also I can add a lot of filters non-destructively that I wouldn't be able to do with a normal layer. So for example, if I wanted to add a liquefy or a sharpen, I can add that as a filter and then go back and change that rather than having to create a new layer, duplicating layers, so you end up with a really big layers palette.
Absolutely. So you've got a complete non-destructive edit in your workflow all the way back to the raw file at any point in time. Even if you've done your sharpening, you can go back to your raw file and edit that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly.
That's a great new workflow technique, and you can try that as well with your images. It's a really flexible way of working. We've done a lot of work on smart objects and making more filters work non-destructively on those smart objects. So things like liquefy and all the new lens blur filters you can use on the smart objects as well. So really, smart objects is what we're seeing as a great new workflow inside Photoshop and Lightroom as well.
Brilliant.
Cool.
So the next thing I'm going to do once it's in is I'm going to apply sharpening. So if I come into Sharpen, in Smart Sharpen, and this is going to bring out those finer details. So if I just zoom into my image just a tad, and I'm going to put this just as default, and if I toggle that on and off, you should be able to see that things like the eyes and also some of the wood on the bed will just pop.
So you're bringing the textures out of the scene.
Yeah,
give more
exactly.
Context. Okay.
We've got this set on lens blur. Because there's no motion in the image, I'm pretty much stationary. It's just going to remove that little bit of me moving around because I haven't had the camera on a tripod, and just press OK.
Perfect.
And while that's waiting, it's not going to take too long. Normally you'd have to apply this directly to a layer and you'd be stuck with whatever results were. So you'd have to then press undo and maybe apply, or if you wanted it to be non-destructive, you'd have to have it as a second layer. Whereas this, you can see, has come up as a mask, smart filter mask. So I can then toggle that on and off.
Cool. Okay. So you can just try it now and see how it looked before and after.
And if for example I didn't like the effect, I can double click on these again, and it's going to bring up that dialog box, so I can say, okay, actually, perhaps I want this to be a bit sharper.
So you can really get the result you're looking for through your eye, by trial and error, without having to go backwards a step. And so it's a really nice, efficient workflow.
And the other great thing is with these smart filters that you can apply more than one filter at the same time.
Right.
So I've got my mask here, which is at the moment white, which means it's completely on. It's showing the effect to the entire image. But I can also then go in and say, okay, well, I've got my smart sharpen there, but perhaps I also want to do some liquefying to this layer as well. So I can come into my filter, liquefy. Just make that a little bit bigger. There we go. Now there's not a lot I want to do to this image. There's not a lot that's really standing out. Usually I'd use it on the hair, but obviously she's wearing a hat and the hair's quite voluminous there anyway. But one of the areas that I might work on is sitting. Now we all know when we sit down, things tend to spread a little bit on the surface. So I can come in here and I can just lift that up.
Oh, nice.
Just the smallest amount.
So just a little bit of trimming.
Yeah, the smallest amount. And then just press OK as well. Okay,
so just a more natural pose, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're working with clients, if you work in the boudoir, industry, if it's a little thing like, bits over the top of the corset maybe, or if it's just a tad where they've been sitting down, that's going to make it more flattering, they're going to really appreciate
Absolutely.
that. So something to bear in mind. Just don't go over the top, I guess. Okay, so we've got our liquefy on here and we've got our smart sharpen as well. And the next thing I'm going to do is start looking at some of the blemishes. Now, my skin retouching technique is kind of in two parts. The first step is to create a new layer. Now this layer is completely blank, and in this one I'm going to be removing all the really obvious blemishes. So this will be any moles or birthmarks or anything like that perhaps my client has said, please remove them. Or as you can see here, there's some hairs over the face as well. So I'm going to set this to start off with the spot healing tool, and that's going to be set to sample all layers. So we're working on this this layer down here, which is our blank layer, but it's actually going to sample the pixels from the layer underneath from our smart object. So again, it's another great form of non-destructive editing.
And this is a great way of working as well, because it's going to keep your file size really small and only pull in the pixels that you need to work on, right?
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. And also, I guess later on, when you come to open this file in 3 or 4 months' time and want to work on it again, you can see what effects you made, because you can open this layer and see exactly what you made without having to turn on, turn off a duplicate layer and this type of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And you're using the spot heal tool, is that right?
I am, yeah. So this will do for the majority of blemishes, or you can also use the normal healing tool as well.
Right.
So if you're working on areas where you want to maybe sample some skin tone as well and bring that in,
okay,
you can always pop that in. I find that the spot healing tool is really good, or the content aware healing tool is really good for things like getting rid of fine hairs. So if you draw along the line of the hair that you're trying to remove,
right,
it will keep the texture in there as well.
Right, because it's looking at light, it's looking at texture, it's looking at that kind of way the pixels are put together, so it's going to blend in much nicer.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
So when you're doing this type of work, when you're removing blemishes and doing a bit of spotting and retouching there, you're working with your client all the time, and you're making sure that they're fully aware of what's going to happen and what they want to take away from the scene.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, everyone will have different expectations of what they want. If you're doing something that's very sort of 50s pin-up, for example, like the illustrated Vargas Elgrin, that kind of thing, they're going to be more about, getting rid of all these hairs on the side, which you could use using the clone tool, perhaps. They might want very clean skin, so they might not want freckles, whereas now obviously freckles are coming back in again. People want to see that in the skin as well. So yeah, it depends on what your client's after, but the one thing that I have noticed is it really is about the detail and the time that you spend. So little things like the stray hairs on the face here, for example, especially these, having them gone makes such a difference to an image. So I'm going to be using my healing tool, so sampling from the local area. And this doesn't have to be done that perfectly right now, it just has to be close, because we'll be sorting this out later with the second part of the skin retouching. So
you're just doing it in small sections, so you get actually the kind of lighting as it comes through to match the original lighting.
Right. And sampling regularly, so sampling from the local area. If you're doing bigger brush strokes, you tend to end up with entire patches of skin, and sometimes it doesn't look as realistic.
Okay. Yeah, skin's always tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have other techniques for skin as well that you're gonna show the audience as well?
And there's plenty of ways of doing skin. There's calculation methods, there's channel methods, and that's not to say that one is better than another. It's just the one that I'm showing today is the one that I find has the most realistic texture. Okay.
And I see you using a pen here as well. Do you find that giving you a lot of control when you're actually painting in this type of skin and texture as well?
Yeah, it gives me far more control. I can, because it's mapped to screen, I can get precise points on there, so I'm not having to do a lot of this, getting my mouse to the right spot.
Right. Well, it's looking amazing already. I mean, it's looking fantastic, so the client will be very happy.
Yeah, and obviously we're recording off the screen today, so it's working a little bit slower than it normally would.
Right.
But
it's quite a fast process anyway.
Yeah, and obviously the more time you spend working on this and in your home studio environment, you'll pick up pace on this a lot quicker as well.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the majority of that gone. You can see that the skin's not exactly the greatest of quality there right now, but we will come back and fix that.
Fantastic.
Cool. So, for the most part, just get rid of a few more of these blemishes on the face down below as well. And I think that will do for now.
Perfect.
So the next step that we're going to do is I'm going to package this up into a new smart object. So I'm just going to highlight, so that's getting all of our smart filters, the original image and all of our blemishes. and I'm just going to right click on that and convert that into a smart object. Now what it's going to do is it's going to put it all together so it's in that one layer. Right. It just keeps my layers panel free of hassle, free of other layers. And if I want to access that any time, I can just double click on the smart objects, right, and it will allow me to go back and edit those at any time.
I'm guessing that people in the old techniques before smart objects would really kind of come to fruition is that people would make a lock-off layer, and that lock-off layer would stop them going through to the original raw file, so they have to go through that a lot of work. Yeah. So this is a better way of doing it. It's more flexible, and you can always get back to the raw file and get money for the raw file when you want to do that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now I've got this one. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer. Now what this is going to be a non-destructive edit, but to do this I need to actually rasterize the layer. So to keep all the information that I have, that's going to be down below, and I'm just going to name this one frequency separation.
Using the frequency separation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So if I right click on this again, control click if you're on a Mac, I'm just going to rasterize that layer. So that's going to remove all that smart information that we had below, and it's now just a normal flat Photoshop layer. I'm going to duplicate this twice, so that's Command J. The bottom one of those two layers is going to be my low frequency.
Mm-hmm. And this is just really for skin, isn't it? It's a great technique for skin.
Well, it's great for skin, but the more I've played around with this, I've been using this quite a lot this year, and it's actually great for everything. You use it on backgrounds, you can use it on clothing. So if you've had clothing, say you've had someone in, they've had a really creased shirt, anything like that, you can use it to get rid of creases in shirts and things like that, to fix hair, all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those techniques that it's definitely worth adding to your portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it will fix a multitude of sins. So the low frequency layer, I'm just going to turn this top one off. We're going to come up into filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. Now this is going to apply a softening effect to the whole image, so it's going to give you block colour rather than the fine detail colour that we've been looking at before. And for my work anyway, 4 pixels seems to be about right. You can sort of play around with that. There's a little bit of leeway in there, but 4 for now will do. As you can see, that's blurred out our image quite substantially. And on our high frequency layer, we're going to come up to Image, Apply Image, and we're going to select our layer to low frequency on the RGB channel, which should be there as normal, and I'm going to invert that. Okay. So you're going to get this kind of grey thing come up. The blending mode will be Add, and the scale will be 2, and the offset 0. And I'm just going to press OK. Now, it looks a bit strange right now. Right. Yeah.
But she wouldn't be too happy with that, I don't think, would she?
No. But if I come into my blending modes and come down to linear light, you can see that the image is returned back to normal. Right. So if I just toggle them off and on, you shouldn't be able to see any changes at all. Right. So the idea is that your low frequency is where you're going to be editing your colour. So for example, if you've got someone that's come in with bruises, or red skin, maybe they've had a bit of a rash or something on the day, flushed under the camera, you can correct that tone in there without changing the texture. Right. So if we start with that layer.
So you're basically separating the colour from the texture, so you can work with both of them individually, and then you can blend them up together, right?
Because I mean, especially, you know, sometimes people will have really great tone, but perhaps have areas of skin where the texture is not quite right, or could be the opposite. They have really great textured skin. But perhaps you've got quite mottled colour on there as well. It also depends on, you know, the heat of the studio and stuff. If you wanted to remove some of the pink, for example. Okay, so as you can see, I've added in a blank layer here. Nothing on it. It's just literally coming down, pressing on this one down here. So no content, normal layer. And I'm going to come across to my clone tool, which is shortcut S. And you may not have explored these in the past, but up here where you've got current layer, there's a drop down menu again, which we can come in to current and below, so I can sample from that low frequency layer without actually altering the content. So if I do make a mistake or need to go over something, I can either add a mask to the layer or undo it without affecting the rest of the image as well.
Great.
For this, I tend to zoom out just a tad as well. I find that I've got a little bit more freedom and I can see things if I'm zoomed out rather than focusing in, where I could tend to get lost. So I'm going to start with a medium-ish size brush.
That's a soft brush that you're using there to
blend
that in nicely.
So it's literally the first brush in the colour palette, so it's got a really nice soft edge to it, quite feathered. And we're also going to set the opacity to about 10, just so that I'm not sampling the whole colour. It's not going to make really harsh changes, but it's enough for skin anyway. So I can come in, use my Alt key to sample from the local area and start fixing that colourway.
So it really kind of blends that skin in. Oh, nice. Okay, I see.
Now, 10's probably just a little too harsh for this area, so I'm going to knock that back to 5%.
And using a small brush there, is that on purpose, using a small brush rather than a bit of bigger brush? But you just looking for fine detail?
You can work with a brush at any size, obviously what works best for you, but I find that I tend to use a brush that's although the brush is slightly bigger, I'm using a pressure sensitive tablet, so the harder I press, the bigger that area of pressure sensitivity is. You're just blending that area in, bringing over that skin tone.
Fantastic.
Getting rid of what looks like a black eye at the moment.
So how will you normally spend on an image when you're editing then, Tigz?
When I'm at home, it's about half an hour.
Okay.
It's not too long. I suppose, well, half an hour depends on how you view it as a long time on an image, but my clients generally are only picking 4 or 5 images per session, so I'm not editing like a whole entire wedding of 200-300 pictures. So, you know.
And do you normally sit down with your clients at that point in time in the model and work out which pictures they like and the pose they like, or do you normally go back to the client and do that?
So after all my shoots, we have a private consultation, so I'll go through and take out the ones that, the sneezes, the blinks, the funny ones, and the ones that I know that they're definitely not going to want to see, and actually do them in Lightroom. So I'll take out the using the filter rating system, and set them to 3 for the ones that they might like, and then 0 out the ones, so they're not deleted, they're just not, you know, necessarily visible straight away. And we'll sit down and have a consultation, normally take them for cake.
Nice.
And we'll sit down, we'll go through the images, we'll discuss what they like about them, and I find it's much better to actually sit down with them and work through the process of choosing those images, because as we all know, when we look at images, we see what are our the points that we focus on. So whether it's the bits that you don't like about yourself or the bits that someone else has commented on the past. So for example, you know, when I was younger, I had a big complex about my nose. So every photo was about how my nose looked in the photo. And then you're not focusing on, you know, your waist, your arms, the overall composition of the picture. You're just focusing on the one thing. So yeah, sit down, we go through the ones that they do like, give them some feedback, but obviously they're, you know, whatever they choose is final, and then we'll say, you know, okay, we like these images, is there anything specific you need done to them, and some might say, you know, can you hide this bit, can you know, delete this area, can you, all kinds of things. You know, I've had some really, really funny requests over the years.
But I guess you're also building the relationship with that client and that customer as well, right? So then you work better next time, and you get better results, and it's an ongoing thing. Okay.
I'm just going to show down here as well with the legs. I'm just going to set that to 10 again. It's great for things as well. If you ever shoot anyone that's, you know, stockings or tights or anything that's got a quality sheer fabric, it can leave the streaks on the skin as well, and have a funny appearance in front of the camera. So if I sample from this area and just brush up.
Oh, cool. So it's really smoothing out those pixels and that colour to really blend that in, so it looks really nice when it's finished piece of work. Oh wow, big difference.
Yeah.
there.
So if I just toggle that one on and off quickly.
Wow. Yeah.
You do tend to lose just a little bit of the overall tonality of it. So as you can see, this leg we've still got quite a nice shine, whereas this one doesn't. So we will go in and add that later with a highlight. But as an overall, although you've still got that texture in there as well.
Right, okay. So it's just the colour you're blending, not the texture.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a really great technique.
And it's great. So you've got that little bruise there. So that's gone. You've still got the texture in the leg.
Wow.
Let's get rid of some of the some of the bunching here around the knee as well. So yeah, so that, I mean that's quickly what this is capable of. Obviously, you'd spend more time, but it's not just for skin. You can also use it on the background. So, for example, we've got some tonality missing here in the wood.
So maybe the lights have caught a bit too much.
Yeah,
a bit too
and then
much
I just do this bit as well, where there's an indentation where there's obviously been a sort of like a suspender strap there at some point, and I can come in and quickly edit that out as well. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
And that's gone over the black slightly, so I can put a mask on this layer, and with a soft black brush at 100%.
Just dial that back. Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
and again,
cool.
you know, if you've made mistakes or you've gone over things, you can fix those in the same way. So, I mean, that, just to toggle that on and off quickly, you can see the differences around. Just zoom in a bit on the eye.
Wow. Yes, it's really nice and smooth. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
And we've got a colour cast, which again I'd fix. I'd spend more time on this. I'd probably spend another 15-20 minutes.
Okay.
The majority of my time's actually probably spent on this element, and just to show you the frequency separation as well. So this now is our texture. So I mean, let's look at the legs again with the stockings, because we've got some streaks in here. We've got some sort of marks down here. So if we go back to our clone tool. So we have that set on current and below. I'm going to change that back to current, so we're working directly on this high frequency layer. And the opacity again is going to be 100, so that's my 0 shortcut. And I can use this brush again to sample from the local area.
Oh wow, so you're just getting rid of the texture and just leaving the colour in place, because that's on the other layer. Perfect.
Get rid of the scar on the knee as well.
Right.
A couple of points in here. A few bits that I missed earlier.
Cool. Okay.
And again, like areas on the skin where we've got some indentations. Just soften those back. Again, we haven't worked on this area with the colour, but you can come in and fix that on here as well.
Perfect.
And then the face. Now this is the one thing that most people tend to worry about with their skin retouching. Whether it's too smooth, whether it's got enough texture or not. The great thing about this is because you're sampling from the local sort of surroundings, you can keep that texture from the skin without having to apply like a generic blur or anything like that.
So selectively painting that texture.
Yeah.
Okay, smooth it out. Oh, nice. Look at that. Wow.
So I'm not going to get rid of the lines underneath completely. Because you know they're going to add character and people look strange if they don't have them in there.
Right.
Just as a very quick couple of clicks, keep sampling from around where you're working. It's really important. The skin, obviously, when you're looking at skin and it's directly on, the skin here and the pores and the texture of the skin is going to have a very different to the skin that you've got on an angle down here as well.
Right. So you always think about the light and how you lit this and how the shadows need to be and that type of thing as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think everyone kind of struggles with skin because it's so complex, but these are great kind of techniques on how to fix it up and make it look really kind of natural, but also give it more of a kind of a boost to the model and also to the final piece as well.
And this works on things like eyebrows as well. So if you've got some hairs missing, you can just brush those in.
So rebuilding stuff.
Yeah, exactly, and bits in the hair as well. So for example, I don't know, there's a few bits here that could perhaps have a little bit more texture, so I can sample from there and add in the hair streaks as well.
Right.
So if you have hair that maybe is a little bit bitty, or you've lost some of the sharpness from it, perhaps through other, getting rid of those fine hairs, you can build them back in by cloning and adding that onto the colour that's already there. So, I mean, obviously this has been done really quickly and I'd spend more time on it and fix things like this colour cast that we've got here. But the elements that I've used are all there. So what I've done is I've prepared one from earlier.
Why not?
So what I'll do is highlight all of these, right click on them again. I'll have converted them into a smart object, which is what we've got in this folder here.
Perfect.
So if we just zoom in on here.
So you're basically using Smart Objects to isolate that retouch element. So if you need to change it, you can go back at any point in time.
And it's a really good point as well to mention is always make sure that you're labeling your Smart Objects, because you need to know where your original layer is. So this one here, for example, I've named frequency separation. So I know if I double click on that, the next bit that comes up will be all of my frequency separation.
Top tip, label your layers. Top tip.
So here's the one that I made earlier, and if we look into this image, you can see that we've neatened up the hair. All of that hair along that hairline's gone. We've also lightened the bits under the eyes as well, so they're not so strong with the shadows.
Just nice and clean, really clean.
And then sort of working down the image as well, we've got this bit where all of the redness has been removed, and the stockings as well. So you can see most of the lines have gone. So they've still got a little element of being stockings. They've got that texture in there, but the colour's a lot better. You haven't got those lines. Okay, so the next step is going to be our shadows and highlights. So what I'm going to do is come into my Select colour range.
So you're going to add, basically, you're going to boost the image, you're going to add like a 3D to it and really kind of give it some punch using the contrast.
Yeah, so I mean, we removed some of the shadows earlier, but this gives me more control over where I want those shadows to be. If we come up into our Select box up here, it gives us a range of options. Mine is already set on shadows, and I can pick a colour range.
So this is new in CC, isn't it? This only came out a few weeks ago. This is brand new,
brand new to my workflow as well.
Brand new workflow. I like that. That's good.
And I can also choose how that affects the image as well, whether I want that to be really, finely located, quite sharp, or I can fuzz that out a bit, sort of more like a feather.
Right.
So it's controlling the areas that's actually working on.
So you're using the actual range to go and select all the shadow area, and then you're going to feather it in using the fuzziness area, so it blends into the scene much nicer.
Yeah.
But it's a faster way of putting the shadows
much
in, right?
Much faster, yeah. Right. And just press OK on that one. And that's going to come up with a selection, and then come up here and press on the selective colour adjustment.
Okay.
So that's going to apply a master image. Now, nothing technically has changed right now, but if I come into my properties and just slide that black up, if I toggle that one on and off, you can see this just added that extra little bit of depth in the picture.
Wow, just add some dimension.
Yeah, and you can do this with all your colour ranges as well. So if you wanted to do it with your highlights, or if you wanted to do it with your mid ranges, you've got that control over them.
So the amount of time this is saving, if we look at the mask, the amount of time this is saving you is huge.
Yeah, I mean, that was what, 30 seconds?
Yeah.
It was nothing.
Okay.
And then again, you could do the same with your highlights, although for mine, because I've obviously taken stuff out with the legs and the stockings, I actually like to go and put these in manually.
Right.
So the other way, of course, that you could do it, Command-Shift-N, creates a new layer. I'm just going to call this highlights. And I'm going to set the blending mode to overlay with a 50% overlay neutral.
Okay.
Just press OK. So that's going to appear like a grey, although you can't actually see it on your image.
So not affected by the blending mode.
It's still at 100%, so it's still there in full capacity. And if I click on my highlight tool, my dodge tool, shortcut O, and I've got my range at highlights. You've got a couple of options in there, and my exposure at 5%. So again, it's not a huge change. So it gives me the chance to work on things, build them up, rather than doing all the change in one go.
Right. So you keep control and.
Yeah. So I'm going to come up here. I've got sort of like a mid-sized brush.
Also, just setting the highlight area just to add a little bit more contrast.
Yeah. So taking the natural highlights from the image and just bringing them out. A little bit on here, a tad on the eyes, just above the eyes as well, really opens them, brings them out. Softening the cheeks a bit as well, giving her a bit of a dewy complexion. If they're wearing a sort of glossy lipstick, you can bring out the shine on the lip as well.
Wow.
And then coming down, wrong button. There we go.
So it just enables the viewer to focus more on her eyes. You come in now into the scene and you basically just go up her arm and then you go straight to her eyes, and it really engages the viewer in what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, it really just helps make the image pop. It's the final touches, isn't it? Let's add some shine along that leg. Follow the natural sheen of those stockings as well, and the light.
Oh, so you work on the light areas where the light
so I'm working on the areas where, you should be able to tell from your image where those natural highlights should fall. The stockings, especially because I've had to remove some of that with with making them a better colour, basically. I did lose some of that, so it was really important to come in there and actually knock some of that colour back in. So if I just toggle that on and off,
wow,
especially in the hair, women love to have glossy hair, so if you can add that shine in, you know, just makes such a difference.
perfect.
Oh yeah, there we go. So that would be my image pretty much done by this point. The aim of my editing in Photoshop really is to remove all the blemishes and get it to a very natural white balance, everything correctly exposed. So what I'd do is I'd save this, so I'd come into my, you know, file, save, and that's going to have an automatic link back to my Lightroom, so it's going to store that file directly with the original. So if I come into Lightroom, and here's the finished image.
Great.
So if we just compare the two, so this one on the left is before Photoshop, and this one is after. There's little things like just more shine in the hair.
So you got more presence in the picture, I guess, and more kind of dimension and all of that.
You can see from that sharpening as well, it's really pulled out the highlights of the bed, so everything's just that little bit sharper, a little bit stronger.
Perfect.
The shadows as well.
So what happens now then, Tigz? After you've finished a retouch, what happens now? I mean, what happens to this picture? Where does it go next?
It purely depends on the client and what the image is for. Now, I don't actually do any cropping of my images until the full image is edited, because these days we work digitally, so, you know, some people are going to want it for web, some people are going to want it in different formats, different sizes. So this is when I then come in and do my cropping, if any. I mean, this one, as it is, it's quite tightly cropped anyway, so I'd probably leave that one. I'd add things like either a vignette here, or
so you're just using a quick preset to put a vignette on the way that...
there's a couple, and there's a few in here that I've set myself as well for various projects.
So that's giving you a consistent look of all your images using the presets.
I've got my radial filter in here, which is brand new as well. So I can add that over there as well if I wanted to do a vignette this way, which affects exposure rather than putting black over the image. So you keep those tonal qualities rather than having the black, which tends to matte out the edges. Okay. So we can add one of those on there perhaps. Makes it stand out a little bit more in the middle. And also if I want to add any split toning detail, one of the things that I found, you know, even going back a couple of years, we go through trends of putting things on photos, or, you know, sometimes thinking it's a really good idea to apply a filter and then changing our minds and being stuck with it. So the great thing about applying them in Lightroom is, you know, say we wanted to add a split tone on here, give it sort of like a warm orange,
a nice vintage look.
Yeah, exactly. So give it that warm vintage glow, which is great, and you know, I might love that for 6 months, but if I decide that I don't, then it's here in an XMP file, so it saves it as, it's about 7 kilobytes of files. It's absolutely tiny, smaller than an email, and I can just come in later and I can toggle that on and off. So it's, again, it's a great non-destructive way of editing.
So you got your base edit, and then you can layer on the final effect based upon what the client wants, or where it's going, or what channel it's going out to socially, or whatever you're doing.
And perhaps, you know, if they want that one and they want a black and white one as well, I've got the option of creating virtual copies and putting them in here. So again, they're small files rather than having to create 2 TIFF or PSD files with all that data in. Right. So I'll make all those changes. I mean, predominantly for me, it's adding some kind of vintage toning, so some kind of, you know, cream, occasionally a blue if I wanted to be a bit colder, and a radial filter or a vignette, depending on the job. Cropping, if I need to do any cropping at this point. But generally the images tend to live in this state, and then once they're ready, then we can export them. Cool, okay.
And when you export them, where do they go to next? What's the next after you've done that final piece?
There's loads of different options in the export. My file system, so I'll have presets on my studio computer. I've got some presets here, so I've got one for full resolution, I've got one for web resolution, and I've got one that automatically comes up with a watermark, so it has my studio details on there. Right. So we can choose to put them in a folder. So you press choose, and come in here. We've got pictures. put in subfolder. So I'm going to call this one Betsy Full, for example, because this is going to be my full resolution ones. So then we're going to go into our file settings. So I've got my format as JPEG and sRGB, so that's formatted for going out for web. Quality 100, so that's going to give me full quality JPEG. You have got other options in here as well, so if your client's asking for a TIFF file, anything like that, they're in there as well. Right. Coming down to image sizing, now I tend to format my full ones to A4 because that's what most people are asking for, but you know, I can come back and get bigger files at any time. Right. But as general, 30 centimeters on the longest edge, and a resolution of 300, which is standard for full resolution printing.
Right, yeah.
Metadata as well, so I'll have added metadata within my library. So that'll be my keywords as well, you know, fashion, photography, London, studio, that kind of thing. And also my copyright data will all be in there as well. Okay. So that will then export with my image. And watermarking. Now, obviously, because they're my full images, I'm going to be sending them to print. I'm not going to want my watermark on these, but if I wanted to, I've got several presets in here for my proofing and for clients, or I can come in and edit my own. So I can put in logo files, or you can put in words as well, and you can change the placement in there. So definitely have a play around with that one.
Right.
And just export when you're done.
Perfect. And you can see the top left hand corner there, it does a quick export and you've got the JPEG.
Yep.
Great, okay. So what happens next then? Do you put that anywhere? Do you kind of socialise that at all using social networks?
Yeah,
that
so
type of thing?
a range. I'm pretty hot on my social networking. So the first thing that I'll do with a project is put it on my website. So that's where it gets its exclusive sort of launch once the client's approved that for public viewing. And as well as that will have direct links to my social media as well, so that'll be my Twitter and my Facebook page. But also I've been using Behance a lot recently, so if we just have a quick look on some of the projects that they've put up, you know, and this is something that you put up and it accumulates likes and you're getting that out there to a wider audience of creatives. In fact, I know there's a lot of art directors and creators are actually looking on sites like Behance for future talent, to work on these kind of projects.
It's almost like LinkedIn for creatives.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. I mean, I've been on LinkedIn and I've not found it that successful, but I've had some great opportunities come out of Behance as well. So we can see that I put this image up a while ago and that's had 93 people look at that and 12 thumbs up, which is great.
Nice. So you're raising your profile through social networks and using that as a platform to actually raise your profile.
And it's really quick and easy to add the work. So you literally come up here, you can add a work in progress or a finished project.
Right. So you could work with a peer group and you could actually work collaboratively on an image by using a work in progress, which is a really great way and a modern way of doing that and get feedback, right.
So we just upload the file, find that in my pictures. It says my image that I've exported, just press choose. And that's going to load that up for me. I've got a range of tools in here as well I can add text.
And you can also pull that in from the Creative Cloud as well. So if you have something on the Creative Cloud, you can just
so if you've got it stored in the cloud, then you can use that content as well.
Great.
Just add a little text box in here. Betsy Rose. Just press continue on that one.
So it's a pretty easy mechanism to get your content up there as well. And I guess you could use as part of Creative Cloud using ProSite, you can actually push this out to a website as well and have this as part of your
and that's another great option that it comes up with within this upload section. So we'll just choose that. Settings again.
So just create a little kind of thumbnail that leads them into the final picture, I guess.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And then you've got things here so you can add in your field. So we'll put this in as photography and retouching. Add some tags. So we've got model, boudoir, so you can add as many as you wish. And
you can link this into your search engines as well, right? So you can have this as part of the search engine optimized search, so people can find your pictures easily while you're putting them into this platform.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's the pro site that you were talking about earlier. So if you have a pro site, you can select a page that you wanted to go on or in your gallery. So you can push that content directly to a site. There's some great ones actually, some really great stuff.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. Yeah.
And some other bits that you may recognise on the side, you can add brands. So if you've been working for a specific company, or if you've been hired by an agency, you can add co-owner credit. So if you've been working collaboratively on something, you can tag them in as well if they're on Behance. And you can also add your tools. So for example, you can tell people what camera you use, lens, whether you use tablet, for example, all that kind of stuff can go in here. Or link to a work in progress. So if you've been working collaboratively on this and you've had feedback files going up, you can link that to those files as well.
And do you find that social networking is a great tool for you to get your work out there? And which social platforms are you kind of using to get your work out there? Which you find the best ways of doing that?
I think it depends on who your clients are and who you're looking for. So for me, working within the burlesque scene, burlesque community, they're very big on Facebook. So a lot of my work within that kind of community is very Facebook orientated. For other things, like I do a lot of work with theatres, and they mostly respond via Twitter.
Okay.
So I find a mix of the two. I'm playing with Google Plus at the moment. I sort of let that slide, but it seems to be coming back again. And of course Behance as well, which I found a really great way of networking and getting constructive criticism from other creatives. Having that work up there, testing the waters, seeing what people are thinking about the work from people that are doing it every day.
Because it's not just photographers, right? It's also people who are graphic designers as well. So you're getting a good mixture of feedback, and it's professional feedback because it is a professional side. So,
exactly.
Right. So it's good quality.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Tigz, it's been great having you here today. Really enjoyed chatting to you about your retouching techniques, and hopefully our viewers have really kind of got a handle on what you're doing, and hopefully they can learn some techniques from you and get their pictures look also amazing as well. So thanks very much, Tigz, for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for on behalf of our audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.